What's going on, guys? K-Pine here and welcome back. And in this video, I'll be featuring Hisuian Electrode in the Hisui Cup. Pretty fitting if I do say so myself. Electrode has massive core breaking abilities with access to both Wild Charge and Energy Ball to hit 3 extremely common mons in Empoleon, Drapion, and Gastrodon for super effective damage. In these battles, I'm running Electrode on the lead because that ability to Wild Charge and Dip truly cannot be overstated. Shadow Drapion on the safe swap, of which is what it's an absolute beast at being, and Frostlass in the back because you already know that Electrode is going to get that shield advantage for it to close. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Hisuian Electrode into Gastrodon. Now you may think this is a fantastic matchup for us since we have access to double super effective Energy Ball to absolutely annihilate that Gastrodon. But it's really more of a neutral one, since with this season, Mudslap got buffed to make it do more damage and gain more energy. Gastrodon actually outpaces us to body slams as opposed to our energy balls. Added to that, if Gastrodon double shields, they can farm you down all the way, given you're going straight energy ball. With that said, it's very crucial you play it out how I do here. It's a little risky, but that's how you win the 2-shield in this scenario. You always have to throw in good timing, as that is very crucial in almost all situations, but specifically this one. You throw your energy ball to get a shield from your opponent, then you go and actually bait with a wild charge. It's a little bit of a risky bait, but you have to, because by baiting that wild charge, that will allow you to reach another energy ball on what would be the CMP tie to their third body slam. And by doing so, that forces you to get switch advantage as to whether they play to that CMP tie, which they lose, so your Hisuian Electrode takes out their Gastrodon, or they catch that energy ball onto something else, like my opponent did in this matchup, being the Munchlax. If we go straight energy ball, your opponent will be able to win the 2-shield scenario, and they leave with their Gastrodon extremely healthy. And that is not what you want at all. So it's a little bit of a risky play to do that wild charge bait, but is absolutely needed one in order to get switch advantage. Now in this matchup, here we just over farm as much as possible with our Frost, take out the Lickitung with the Avalanche, throw one more Powder Snow for good timing, land that Shadow Ball, and from here, this match is over, as this is only enough for a Body Slam, which is double resisted, and my Frostlass leads to a simultaneous KO with the Gastrodon, but with both the Shadow Drapion and the Hisuian Electrode alive, we're able to take that one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Hisuian Electrode into Shadow Drapion, and this one is Bite. So we are going to build up to the double wild charge before we throw a move here. Now, while I can survive this Fell Stinger and still get off both of my wild charges, I do commit a shield to preserve HP and potentially reach a third wild charge later on in the game. But my opponent swaps into their Razor Leaf Torterra to catch that wild charge. Very nice catch by them, but unfortunately we do have that Frostlass in the back to farm the Torterra all the way down with those double super effective Powder Snows and leave with an Avalanche to get that shield back from the Drapion. Unfortunately, I don't reach a second Avalanche, but I do have my Hisuian Electrode with a Wild Charge still stored. And instead of actually coming to my Electrode right there, because my opponent shields that Wild Charge, they can just farm all the way down, and I don't want to give them that energy lead, so I decided to come in with my own Shadow Drapion instead to tank that energy and their moves. And it actually ends up being the correct call because they do have a Gastrodon in the back. So 2 moves do take out the Gastrodon. We come in with our Hisuian Electrode, make it to a Wild Charge. This will get the shield from my opponent. And from here, because we got that shield, this match is now over because I can safely shield this Fell Stinger from my opponent. They're going to ramp up their attack, but it's not going to be enough as we will reach this crunch in time to take out the Drapion. If you're wondering why I went Crunch here instead of Aqua Tail, while Crunch is resisted and Aqua Tail is neutral, even though Aqua Tail is more energy efficient, if you're only going to get to 1 move, Crunch does more raw damage, so that's why I went for that to close out the game. Next battle, we lead Hisuian Electrode into Magnezone, and while our moves are all resisted here, that Magnezone is in even more trouble, as that Wild Charge is double resisted and the Mirror Shot themselves is resisted, so it barely does any damage. But my opponent here is running Flash Cannon, and that did not look like a resisted move, as Hisuian Electrode does tank that and get off the Wild Charge, which does massive damage to the Shadow Frostlass. So now this gives me an opportunity to just bring in my own Frostlash, shield once and farm down. Now, while that Flash Cannon did not look resisted against our own Hisuian Electrode, that Energy Ball did not look resisted against their Shadow Magnezone either. It does massive damage to each other. And now here, with that farm down, I'm going to bring my Frostlass in, go for the Avalanche to take out their Shadow Magnezone, which they shield because they want to get off energy. And then from here, I will shield just because I know they are not at a second move. And they bring in a Hisuian Electrode. They're at a Wild Charge here. I'm at an Avalanche. I lose CMP, so instead of playing that CMP tie, I'm going to swap into my Drapion to catch that Wild Charge, as well as save that Avalanche for later. And from here, this game is over. I can either overfarm, so I'll be able to reach an Aqua Tail before the Shadow Magnezone farms me down, or even better, the Hisuian Electrode does take me out. I can just farm it down with my Frostlass and then go for the Shadow Ball to take out the Shadow Magnezone. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Electrode into Empoleon. Fantastic lead for us. And we are going to throw these Wild Charges after 10 Thunder Shocks or when we get to the back-to-back. In most situations, your opponent will throw the Drill Peck first, but in this situation, they do not because they want me to debuff myself, which is a smart play by them, but in doing so, they're forced to go down 2 shields, where I can now save my Electrode for later, because if they're staying in with Empoleon, they're ABA weak to it. Again, Electrode with its core breaking abilities. So we do swap into our Drapion. We do manage to bait out that Gastrodon, which is fine because we have a decent energy lead here, which means we are going to be able to reach 2 crunches. I should have gone for 2 crunches here, because by going for Aqua Tail, they will survive that and be able to farm down. If I try and get to 2... Little fortunate here, my opponent does end up throwing a Body Slam, but if you cash out on that Aqua Tail, your opponent will be able to farm you down and leave with a ton of energy. If you commit to that crunch, it forces them either to throw a Body Slam or commit a shield, which is what I should have done. But either way, we're able to make up for that by catching the Hydro Cannon onto our Electrode. And oh no, this poor Shadow Glade is getting absolutely nuked by that Wild Charge. Just does so much damage. As we bring in our Frostlass, reach the Shadow Ball. Even though we're not in Hydro Cannon range, we will shield it just in case and land this Shadow Ball to take the match. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Electrode into Munchlax. So, per usual, we are going to build up to the double Wild Charge. And my opponent makes a very risky play here that actually ends up paying off for them. They play to the CMP tie once I get to the back-to-back Wild Charges, forcing me to either give up a shield here or have to eat this Body Slam with my defense double debuffed. I do know I can survive it though, so I will let it go and still get off the second Wild Charge, and then from here, I'm going to safe swap into that Drapion. Loading up on energy, I do go for Aqua Tail here, hoping it will be just enough, but it is not. I should have built up to that crunch, because as you'll see here, I am forced to shield or eat that Bulldoze now. If I just built up to the crunch, it would have been enough to take out the Munchlax. I would have been in a great position, but I got a little greedy. And now in comes a Bastion, and that's actually great, because the Bastion's off of my Frostlass, so we are now going to start spamming off these Aqua Tails, making sure to throw in good timing, which is after 1, 4, or 7 Poison Stings. We want to be able to maximize our energy to try and get off as many moves as possible. We will give up a shield there just because we can't afford to see the Bastion onto our Frostlass. Going for one more Aqua Tail, And from here, I'm only going to reach one more move, so we are going to go for the harder hitting crunch, as well as the chance at that defense drop, which we do get fortunate enough for the defense drop. I swap into my Hisuian Electrode, trying to be able to get a Thunder Shock down, just not able to. Where my win con here is them shielding this crunch so I can then land the Shadow Ball, but my opponent makes the right call. They let that crunch go, and at this point, I no longer have a win condition, as they will be able to reach the Moonblast or Future Sight. Looks like they are running Future Sight, and then from here they will outpace to the Grass Knot before I get to the back-to-back Avalanches. Well played to my opponent, GG's. Next battle, we lead Electrode into Shadow Gliscor. So we are going to build up energy and throw this energy ball. And whether my opponent shields or no shields the energy ball, we will then safe swap into the Drapion, but my opponent catches that energy ball onto their own Drapion. Very nice play by them. But in that case, that allows me to land that energy ball, stay in, fire off that wild charge, and then dip into my own Drapion, giving me that shield advantage. Now their Drapion is going to be firing off Aqua Tails. I can let the second Aqua Tail go. Fire off a crunch of my own before they get to their next Aqua Tail, which is just enough to take out the Drapion, so we're able to get switch advantage and have a shield advantage here. So we can let this move go and now put our Frostlass onto the Gliscor. They get the boost, but it's alright, just because we have these double super effective Powder Snows, which are going to force a swap out for my opponent anyways. Of which in the back they have Drapion. So they have Toxicroak, excuse me. So once their own Drapion is gone, my opponent is absolutely core broken by this Frostlass, and I will be able to close out the game. Here I swap into my Electrode just to force them to throw some energy here, otherwise I get to another wild charge. Where now I can just shield once. It is a Mud Bomb bait, so I will fire off this Avalanche right before they would get to their Shadow Ball. We're over farming as much as possible, trying to maximize our energy. Avalanche does take out the Toxicroak, and from here we will outpace the Gliscor to another Avalanche to take this one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Electrode into another Shadow Magnezone. So like last time, we are going to load up on energy and fire off this energy ball right away. See what my opponent wants to do, if they want to give up a shield to resisted move or let it go. And my opponent does give up a shield because they know how much that energy ball does to the Shadow Magnezone. We are now going to let this go. My opponent goes for a wild charge, and I can actually, and as you'll see from there, I can actually survive 2 wild charges. So my opponent fires off the other wild charge, I can let that go and still reach another energy ball to take switch advantage. Hisuian Electrode has basically no negative lead matchups in this cup, where even if they're up against a Shadow Magnezone where all of our moves are resisted, all the Shadow Magnezone's moves are either resisted or double resisted. It's kind of crazy that Hisuian Electrode isn't being used more often when it has as good as matchups on the lead as it does. We are going to let our Frostlass go down right there, and in the back my opponent swaps into the Drifblim. So we're going to fire off this wild charge right away, take out the Drifblim, swap into our Drapion, and from here, 1 Volt Switch and a Wild Charge is enough to take out the Shadow Drapion. But if they do Wild Charge and I let it go, then my Hisuian Electrode with the shield will be able to reach a Wild Charge of its own and close out the match. My opponent ends up going for the Mirror Shot anyways, which just solidifies the win for us, but either way, we had that one. GG's to my opponent. Next battle, another Empoleon Lead, and this one my opponent swaps into a Drifblim, so they are absolutely core broken. We are going to throw after 6 Thunder Shocks on the Drifblim safe swap to ensure good timing due to the 1 turn it takes for them to switch. And now we are going to swap into our Drapion to shut down this Drifblim. That Wild Charge guarantees that shield, and then that dip ability brings in our Drapion in what is already a very, very lopsided matchup. If you do get the defense drop on the crunch, like I do here, you will be able to Poison Sting down before their 3rd Icy Wind or Mystical Fire, whichever one they're running. I thought for some reason Icy Wind and Mystical Fire was 4, then 3, then 3, when it's actually 4, then 4, then 4. So if you do get that crunch defense drop, you will be able to Poison Sting down in time. If you don't get that crunch defense drop, I'm honestly not sure. You can test it and see for yourselves. In the back, my opponent does have that Shadow Gliscor, and we're able to take that one. GG's. Next battle, we lead Hisuian Electrode into another Gastrodon. So we're going to play it out exactly like I told you. With the previous Gastrodon lead, we will commit a shield, make sure we're throwing on good timing after 1, 3, or 7 Thunder Shocks, and fire off this energy ball. This will guarantee the shield for my opponent, and if they stay in, we are going to build up, go for that Wild Charge bait, but they end up swapping into a Munchlax. So now we are going to go for that Wild Charge and dip strategy that Hisuian Electrode knows and loves. Oh, and the previous matchup, where it was an Empoleon Drifblim Shadow Gliscor team. When they save swap into the Drifblim right there, you might be tempted to bring in your own Frostlass, because Frostlass has a great matchup. But that's kind of the whole point of a Drifblim or a Cresselia save swap, is to bait out your Frostlass so the Shadow Gliscor doesn't see it. That's why every time you see an Empoleon lead, followed by a Cresselia or a Drifblim save swap, you want to make sure to bring your Shadow Drapion into it so you can save that Frostlass in the back. And now here, my opponent, we've managed to manage our energy very well in this matchup, but we end up with very poor alignment in the end game with our Frostlass onto the Gastrodon. And unfortunately, because of its bulk, this might be just a little too much to overcome. We are going to stay in, try and see what we can do here. Going to go for this energy ball, which does get this shield. We're going to fire off this energy ball on alignment just so we can make sure it's able to land, which the energy ball does. Now we're going to load up on energy, overfarm as much as possible before the next move, which unfortunately is as soon as we get the Avalanche. The Avalanche does take out the Gastrodon, but even then, the Gastrodon is able to outpace us, land that Water Pulse, and take out our Frostlass. GG's to my opponent, well played. Next battle, we lead Hisuian Electrode into another Empoleon. Hisuian Electrode catching all the great leads in this cup. And would you look at that, the opponent is staying in it again, potentially core broken by the Hisuian Electrode with maybe a Drifblim in the back. Just like last time, I should say. So we are going to build up to that Wild Charge. As you see there, my opponent ended up throwing the Drill Peck first, so we can let it go because we're not debuffed yet. Throw one more Thunder Shock for that Wild Charge, guarantee that shield. My opponent tries to catch the next Wild Charge onto their Gastrodon, but we are patient. We are able to fire off the Energy Ball to either take it out or guarantee that 2-0 shield advantage. And with a 2 shield advantage, you already know how absolutely deadly Frostlass is. The Shadow Ball will land, not quite enough to take out the Gastrodon, so we will give up the second shield right here, get a farm down, and if we leverage our energy right, we will be able to take out the Empoleon and reach a move against whatever they have in the back. So we're going to fire off the Shadow Ball right before they reach their next Hydro Cannon. Shadow Ball is enough to take out the Empoleon, and they have a Frostlass in the back. So my own Frostlass is going to sweep this entire team and close strong. GG's to my opponent. Even though the Hisui Cup is a very condensed meta, Hisuian Electrode is one Pokemon with extremely good core breaking abilities, especially when it doesn't really have any hard counters. And because of that, it's really surprising to me it doesn't see more play. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.